How's everyone doing today? So, basically, what we're going to be talking about today is a vulnerability assessment that we did in Nessus, and I am specifically talking about my partner, Valen Arnett's Windows and Linux server that he built for the class of ISA 4220 for Kennesaw State University, and my name is Calvin Barber. Let's get started. So, getting into some details of like the date and time, basically, or the location carried out of the scanning of the servers with Nessus. So, basically, the time was like the assessment took place in like different locations, and it was done over via internet. The assessment was done. It was done on November 29th, 2016 at 1 p.m. And then also the scanning of each component took about 2 tries to scan each of the Windows and Linux server. And then basically once Nessus was initialized, the setup of for inputting the IP addresses to scan both servers, it only took about a few minutes. But like after the scans were launched and they both came back. It took about like 3 hours to scan and analyze the results from the Nessus reports or the detailed reports that came back of each critical high, medium, and low vulnerability for each of the servers. And then just that was basically the overall setup. It was in a Kali box. It was over the Kennesaw NetLab environment that Professor Green set up for us. He also set up the Kali box for us, where Nessus was located on a web browser. And once we logged in there, then that's how we scanned our partner servers. So going over to the scope of the test, basically some constraints that we had while trying to scan the servers. One constraint was that it was imposed like during the test was the internet was being very slow. That was most likely because there were so many people trying to scan their servers, and then also Nessus was like it was taking a while to initialize, and it took like an hour probably to initialize for me anyway. And I know talking to Valen as well, it took him a while to get that initialized. And then the IP addresses, they just didn't scan over for some reason. And I believe they didn't scan over, they didn't give the correct results back in the report just because I think the Windows for me, the server kind of like went down or went offline, which didn't let the scan, it didn't let the scan fully like load and carry out its duties. Um, Going into the purpose of the test that we did, the purpose of the test was because both of us made a Linux and Windows server. And first off, what we had to do is basically we had to set up all the services for the servers and then make sure that the services were on there with an Nmap scan. Basically, after that, we had to harden the servers, and basically the purpose of that was for our partner to scan our server, which is basically what I did for Valen. And it was why was it conducted? It was conducted because even though that you harden the server, there's always most likely going to be a vulnerability. So you want to know what that vulnerability is, and it could either be critical or it could be high, medium, or low. And you want to carry out those issues, and with scanning it with Nessus will give you a detailed report of how to fix that and solutions to in fixing those vulnerabilities that you get back on the report. Basically, what was the objective? To find those vulnerabilities and then to find the solutions to either patch them or do an update with Windows Server, for instance. For instance, I had to, and Valen had to do updates through the Windows online on telnet.com to get the updates and patches for that because there was a decent amount of medium vulnerabilities that we both had. And then basically the services required for the servers, like what are the type of servers? Like I said before, we were working on Linux and Windows servers, Windows 2002 R2 to be specific. And then basically we had a checklist right off the bat of the services that we had to use. So for the Windows server, we had to have a Windows firewall. We had to have HTTP POP3, or sorry, no, we had to have SMTP, DNS, Active Directory, database, and EMET for Windows, and then also for Linux we had to have IP tables, Apache, Dovecot, Postfix, Bind, Postgres, SELinux, and then OpenSSH. Those were like the services that we had to have when the Nmap scan was being set up for both of the, or being scanned for both of our servers. We also had OS security issues, and these were discovered while scanning Balin's servers. I also found that there was one critical issue discovered, and basically, this can allow attacker to execute code remotely for the privileges. And then there were two man-in-the-middle issues, including Poodle, which are related to using weak and insecure SSL v3 or like any like weak ciphers on that standpoint. And then on the Linux server for OS, there were 3 low issues that related to weak and unsecure ciphers as well. And then for application security issues, no application security issues were discovered on either Windows or Linux servers, and all issues were related to OS issues. So getting into the technical overview, the technical overview is basically, when I was scanning Valen's Windows server, there were critical, high, medium, and low vulnerabilities. The critical vulnerability that was present was an HTTP service vulnerability that can be fixed by updating the Windows server and a newer update. Scanning the Linux server, there were only 2 high, and then also there were 3 low vulnerabilities dealing with SSL certificates and unsecure ciphers. Getting into the OS security issues, more technical overview. For the critical issue that was on the Windows server for Valen's Windows server, this issue, it was specifically a HTTP service that could allow code execution on which could allow like an attacker to execute arbitrary code with the system privileges. And then there was a medium issue on the Windows server as well. That was a vulnerability to the Security Account Manager, or SAM, and then the Local Security Authority domain policy. And then like they were both middleman attack and could possibly listen. These are middleman attacks, and they could possibly listen in. But that's basically what a middleman attack is. The attacker is able to listen in the communications between the client and the server. And then the other medium issue was associated with SSL v3, which can just be disabled. And then the vulnerability is known as basically like Poodle. That's SSL v3. And the attacker would be able to just to decrypt the text with minimal tries, instead of having like multiple tries to be able to decrypt anything that's being communicated over between the client and the server. And then basically all these recommendations for the Windows would just be, for the HTTP critical one is the patches. Microsoft came out with patches for the Windows server. And you want to update those through the Windows or Microsoft's website. And then for the SSL v3, you just want to disable that one. And then the Linux ones, for the ciphers, you'll have to have like you have to purchase like a software for those to be removed. So that's basically those. And then also the technical overview. We basically had the services, as I said before, in other slides. And the only ones that came up was the HTTP security issues, and then like I said before, on the Windows server that was that showed up on the Nessus report, it was the MS15/034. This vulnerability was the HTTP system, and then the recommended fix for this would be using Microsoft's latest patches for Windows 7 2008 R2, 8, 8.1, 2012, and 2012 R2. For POP3, there were no security issues on either server. For SMTP, there were no security issues for either server. For IMAP, there was no security issues for either server. For DNS security issues, there were none. For Active Directory, there was none. For LDAP, there was none. For database security issues, there were none. And for also SSH security issues, there were no critical, high, medium, or low vulnerabilities for either Valence servers. For Nessus, Nessus is like I said before, this is the scanning software that we used, kind of like the penetration software that we used to scan each other's servers that we made. And like the type of issues, like I said before, they're critical that we used, high, medium, and low. These were all like listed out in each of the reports that we got back. Basically, a critical issue is it's the most vulnerable, dealing with root level exposure to a computer system, and are advised to be patched as soon as possible. A high issue. These are usually result in exploitation, could possibly result in elevated privileges, and could result in significant data loss or information to a company or user. A medium issue, these are issues that cause denial of service and exploits of a local network and any victim. And then low issues, they're basically not really they have very little impact to a business or the quality that require access to system to fix them. And then the tools used, as I said before, we used an Nmap scan, Calibox, and then also Nessus to do all of our work through our servers and for this. These are my references that I used, and they're good suiting for if you had any questions throughout what I said. And also the reports will be in, you'll be able to see those in my paper as well. But I just wanted to say thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.